was an exceptional person, but probably more exceptional than I realised, you know, before this happened. He was very privileged in lots of ways. You know, he grew up in a good home, with a stable family, materially quite comfortable, and he could see the contrast between how he had experienced life and how a lot of these prisoners had experienced their lives, and he felt very lucky.
Can I ask you how you found out that it was your son that had been involved in this?
Yeah. So I had seen reports on Twitter from about 2 o'clock that day that there'd been an incident at London Bridge. I didn't know Jack was at London Bridge that day. I didn't really think much of it other than, oh no, there's been another attack, how terrible. When I got home, my wife was driving my car into the drive, which seemed a bit odd, and she came out. I'd been listening to a podcast on my headphones, and she was just beside herself, saying, we've got to go to London, we've got to go to London. And I said, why have we got to go to London? And she said, because Jack has been involved in this incident at London Bridge. And I said, okay, how do you know? And she said, because Leanne has phoned me and she's been contacted by somebody and we think he's been stabbed. We got to London, we got a taxi, went to the Royal London Hospital and waited, and then we were told at about 11:15 that they'd confirmed that he had been killed. So that was how we found out. And when we got to Cambridge, we had to go and meet our son who'd been working, or been having a drink with his friends in the pub in Cambridge, and we had to get him out of the pub and tell him.
He didn't know? He
didn't know. We didn't want to tell him over the phone. We didn't want anybody else to tell him. So we went and got him. And we had to tell him that his brother had died, which was probably the hardest thing I've had to do so far.
The natural reaction also might be to be really angry because you've just lost your child in the most horrific of circumstances. Do you feel angry about it?
I don't feel angry about what happened. I feel bereft and very, very sad.
Did he know Usman Khan?
He did. He knew Usman, yeah. Yeah, he knew him.
Does it bother you, the idea that Jack knew him? Does that make it worse in your mind in somehow that they had a relationship and then this happened to your child?
It makes it more unbelievable because, again, I can't imagine how someone who had been befriended and helped by someone like Jack could then, in a fairly calculating way, kill them. The only person responsible for what he did is him. So I'm not going to start lashing out saying somebody should have stopped this, somebody must be responsible for this. The police family liaison people advised us not to do anything on social media. I looked on, I suppose I shouldn't have done, but I looked on Twitter on the Saturday morning, and already there was discussion about what had happened and what it meant and some political reaction. Immediately people start jumping on the criminal justice bandwagon, so advocating longer sentences and harsher penalties. And I knew how passionate he was about rehabilitation and helping people to redeem themselves. And I could already see it starting to move in the opposite direction. But I just thought it was important to just push back against that narrative.
You had seen that the Prime Minister had made a statement about being against early release.
Yes.
That story began to build over the weekend.
Yeah. What was required was just, you know, a dignified approach, you know, whereby the politicians would, you know, express their regrets, express their condolences to the people affected, and would then get on with campaigning in the election. It wasn't an election issue. Where most of us were watching this and seeing a tragedy unfolding in front of our eyes, instead of seeing a tragedy, Boris Johnson saw an opportunity and he went on the offensive. He saw an opportunity to score some points in the election. He immediately said, "Oh, this is Labour's fault. They you know, they allowed this to happen. They had this early release policy and so on." And at that point, it was just, well, I had to say something.
So he went on the offensive.
Yes.
Your son, you've just lost him. I mean, you obviously found it very offensive. You found him very offensive.
I did. There was no reference to us, you know. There was no attempt to contact us and discuss this with us or with anybody else, as far as I know.
Did you have any contact from the Prime Minister, from Number 10, about Jack, about what you'd said about sentencing?
No, never.
Nothing?
Never. The only contact we had was that the police liaison officer said to us, "I've been asked if you would like to meet Priti Patel for her to express her condolences," and we just said no, thank you.
There was a beautiful picture of Jack on the front of all the papers. He was graduating, wasn't he? Lovely picture of him.
Yeah.
And then next to it was obviously the headlines about changing the prison sentencing. That was the article that the Prime Minister had written in the Mail. And how did you feel when you saw your son's picture juxtaposed with that?
Pretty much as you would expect. It just reinforced my views and my feelings about the way in which this situation was being exploited. It just struck me as being crass and insensitive, and as we've already said, Jack would have been extremely upset at the way in which things were developing.
But some people have said that you've also politicised your son's death because you don't like Boris Johnson very much. What do you say to that?
I would say that if anybody has a right to say something about this situation, then it's me and his family. You know, we have lost Jack. Jack can't speak for himself anymore. Had there been no comment in the way that it was made, then I wouldn't have said anything. You know, I would have just carried on grieving and helping to support my family. I think the way that it happened and the fact that it was used in such a political way, and I could see the good work that Jack did and that his colleagues did starting to perhaps unravel. It was important that somebody said something, and that just happened to be me. And obviously my son's been killed. People are going to listen to me.